We're now going to create and test our second endpoint, getItems. Now this endpoint is going to return all of the existing items in the database, and we use it to power the front page of the app, which obviously displays all the items. We've actually already created this route and controller method for this endpoint when we were prototyping the API. So it's this .list controller method here. But now we're going to make it work properly by connecting it to the database. So all we really need to do to get this properly working is to use the item.find method, and that's going to return all the items that we've created. So let's clear out the existing code here, and we're going to replace that with a try catch block. Now inside the try, we're going to create a constant items, and we're going to await item.find like that. Now what we need to do is send back the items as a response, so we can go res.send and create an object with items in it like that. Now we'll also need to make this an async method now as well. Now if there's an error, what we're going to do is we're going to send back a status of 500 this time, which is internal server error. Because the assumption we have to make if there's an error here is not that there's erroneous user data, since there's no data supplied in this request, but it must be that the database has failed for some reason. With that done, let's test this endpoint in Postman. So we've already created a Postman request for this endpoint in the collection, so go ahead and open that up. And if you run that now, you'll see that we get the existing item in the database, which is just one of them, and that's returned down here. Now before we create a unit test for this route, we need to address a problem. So that before each lifecycle hook, it goes ahead and deletes all the items in the database. But that means that we won't have any data to test this endpoint. So it's not a requirement actually that our database is empty before each test, just that it's predictable. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some seed data for the database that gets inserted at the beginning of every test after the database is cleared. So to begin with, we're going to create an array of seed item objects just above our before each hook here. So we're going to go const seed items, and we'll assign that an array. Now we're going to create two objects inside of this. The first one is going to be an item, and it's going to have title test item 1, and we'll create another one, and we'll just call this one test item 2 like that. Next, we're going to modify the before each hook. Firstly, what we'll do is we'll cut this out and we'll give this a proper body. And next what we're going to do is, well, first we've got to await item delete many, and then we're going to await item.insert many. So this is a new method we haven't seen before, but it's fairly straightforward. You just pass in an array of objects of that model type, and obviously that's going to mass insert them into the database. So I've just run our previously existing test, and you can see that it's failed. And the reason for that is that previously we asserted that there'd only be one item in the database after our post items endpoint create operation. But now that there's seed data included, there are actually 3 items in the database. So let's go down and fix that in our existing test. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, instead of expecting there to be one item, we're going to say seed items.length plus 1. So that's going to ensure that if we add any more seed items later, that this test is robust enough to continue to pass. Now we're also going to need to change the second expect down here, because now that there's 3 items in the database, we need to access the third one, which we can do by getting seed items.length and using that as the index. And hopefully that should work. So let's go ahead and run those tests again. And we can see everything is now working as it should. Now that we've made a database seed, we can probably test our getItems endpoint. So I won't go through this test in detail because it uses the same principles from before. So I'll just show you the code that I made and I'll quickly explain it. Alright, so I've created a new describe block for this test. And I've created a test case here called should_get_all_items. And how this one works is that we await a request to the app, to the endpoint, sorry. And keep in mind, since this is a GET request, we don't actually need to send any data with this one. Now the first assertion we make is that the request should return a 200 status. And we also want to assert that in the response body that the length of the number of items that we get back is the same as the length of the number of seed items that there are. So with that done, we can go ahead and run the test suite again. And now you'll see that there's 2 passing tests. Before we finish this video, let's refactor our database seed so it's part of its own module. We want to do this not only to set out the code more logically, but also because we're going to be using the seed data module in multiple test files in coming parts of the course. So let's go ahead and create this new file. And we'll call it seed.js. And now let's move in the required code. So first I'm going to cut this here and put that in there like that. But I'm also going to take the before each callback and I'm going to cut that out. And I'm going to assign that to a constant. We'll call this one populate items. There like that. Alright, so this uses the items model, so we're going to have to go ahead and require that in the seed file as well. Oops. Now what we can do is at the bottom we will export both these variables so that they can be used independently in other files. Alright, so coming back to our items test suite now, and what we can do is, well, firstly in the before each hook, firstly we've got to require those, so we're going to go const seed items, populate items, and require our seed module there like that. Now in the before each hook we can just call populate items there like that. Alright, so let's run the tests again and just confirm that worked. Alright, 2 passing tests, so happy days.